For now, I'd like to introduce club member and past president Carl Egge with classification of law practice. Carl was our club president during the Rotary year 2004-2005, and taking a look back in contrast to the future, during his term, he told me he reflected each week on the journey of Lewis and Clark to the Pacific Northwest. His presidency coincided with the 200th anniversary of that extraordinary expedition. And those of us that now inhabit the Pacific Northwest are certainly glad that they came, discovered, and brought some of the better things from the East for us to enjoy. Today, Carl will introduce the remarkable leadership by his Perkins Coie colleagues in the advancement of diversity, equity, and inclusion for global business. Carl, please introduce our main program for today.
Thank you, Jimmy. Little background. When I began practicing law 50 years ago, boards of directors of public companies were, by and large, comprised of only white men, often handpicked by the CEO. Over the succeeding decades, diversity among corporate boards has slowly moved in the direction of boards that represent, more broadly, reflect the corporation's shareholders, employees, customers, and the broader society. Initiatives to increase the number of women on boards has been particularly successful. Locally, the 7-year-old Onboarding Woman program, sponsored by Deloitte, Perkins Coie, Madrona Venture Group, Cascadia Capital, and others, focuses on identifying, training, and nominating women to corporate boards. Onboarding Women has been responsible for adding more than 65 women to the boards of public companies in its brief 7-year history. New legislation in Washington, effective next year, requires Washington public companies to have at least 25% of its board members comprised of women. California has similar legislation, and NASDAQ requires listed public companies to have at least one woman board member and one other diverse member by August 2022. Notwithstanding these steps toward board diversity, there is a glaring underrepresentation of Black members of corporate boards. The Blackboard Initiative is designed to address that diversity weakness. Today, we have a panel of 4 members of the Blackboard Initiative. Patrick Ogawa is the Managing Director of Deloitte's Seattle office. He received his undergraduate degree in finance from the University of Hawaii and the MBA from Northwestern University. Michael Parham is General Counsel of RealNetworks. He was formerly Regional Counsel for IBM in the Midwest and received his law degree from the University of Michigan. Trey Chenier is an Associate Attorney in the Seattle office of Perkins Coie. He received his undergraduate degree in Economics and International Business from the University of Puget Sound, his law degree from the University of Chicago. Panel discussion will be moderated by my partner, Stewart Landefeld, a partner in the business group in the Seattle office of Perkins Coie. Stewart received his undergraduate degree from Yale and his law degree from the University of Chicago. Patrick Ogawa and his colleagues at Deloitte and Stewart Landefeld and his colleagues at Perkins were involved in the creation of the successful Onboarding Women program. Please welcome to Seattle Rotary this distinguished panel to discuss a very important corporate governance initiative.
Thank you, Carl, for your gracious introduction. And thank you, members of the Seattle Rotary, for having us here today. We're looking forward to introducing the Black Boardroom Initiative to you. I'll start with a brief overview and moderate a panel of leaders from Deloitte and RealNetworks who with my colleague from Perkins Coie, our fellow program co-founders, and allow time at the end for questions from members of Rotary. So Caroline, next slide, please. The Black Boardroom Initiative, let's see, Caroline, do we have, let's go one slide further. The Black Boardroom Initiative is an annual education and connection program that consists of 7 substantive sessions and mentorship from current public company board members. Our goal is to increase the number of Black executives on S&P 500 boards, and our motto is 1 in 8 by 28. We base the programs and its methods on the Onboarding Women program that Deloitte, Perkins Coie, and others founded in 2014. Also has a goal of achieving greater board diversity, and through that, a stronger and more representative business board across the country. All sessions in Black Boardroom Initiative are led by subject matter experts, as this slide indicates, or a panel of public company board members. Topics, as we show here, include board recruitment, board strategy, M&A, participants in onboarding women, and Black Boardroom Initiative find that the most helpful session probably is the board bio workshop, because it's critical to getting on a board. We work directly with participants to make sure they have a polished board bio for use at the end of the program to get on their public company board. Let's go on to the next slide, Carolyn, please. The deep support from the Seattle business community has been critical to our early momentum in the Black Boardroom Initiative. And I'd like to take a minute on this page, as we look at this page, to thank our program sponsors who've been giving their support to us to make sure that this program can happen and get early momentum. I'm certain that we have representatives of these sponsors at Rotary today, and to those of you at our sponsor companies, thank you. Thank you very much for believing in our mission and in this program from the start. Let's go on to the next slide. As we go through our program and we talk about some of these topics, please think about an ask that we have for you today, which is to please provide nominations for board seats, for corporate board seats, as well as mentors, people who are on current public company boards, and participants, with board seats really being our deepest need. You can make nominations for participants and mentors on our website, or leave thoughts on board seats at blackboardroominitiative.org. Participants should be Black executives with an interest and skill set for corporate board service, and our mentors are current public company board members. Ellen, let's go on to one more slide. And now with that, I'd like to turn to my fellow co-founders and panelists for today's discussion. Pat Ogawa, as Carl mentioned, is the Seattle office managing partner and the diversity and inclusion leader nationwide at Deloitte. Michael Parham is Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at RealNetworks. Trey Chenier is my colleague at Perkins Coie. I'd now like to, Caroline, go ahead and turn off the slides, and we'll just go back to our gallery view and dive right into a handful of questions. So let me turn to my colleague, Trey Chenier. And Trey, let me ask you, what was the catalyst for getting this program started, for getting the Black Boardroom Initiative going?
Thank you, Stewart, and great to be here with the Rotary. We appreciate your time. As I'm sure many people in this room felt and experienced, the tragic events of 2020, including the murder of George Floyd, brought a new urgency in the business community on how can we move the needle on corporate diversity, starting at the board. As Carl mentioned, the diversity of Black directors has been slow. In 2019, though S&P 500 companies typically have 7 to 12 directors, 37% of those companies had not a single Black director. The the Russell 3000 that same year, only 4.1% of seated directors were Black or African American. And so those are just a couple of quick statistics to highlight the real need for this program. Folks like our co-founders, Stewart, Pat, Michael, and others, came together to think, how could we use our collective networks, our collective passion, and our resources to really move the needle on this effort.
Trey, thank you so much. And now let me turn to Michael Parham, longtime General Counsel, Senior Vice President, Corporate Secretary at RealNetworks. Michael, you can speak to, I hope, some of the challenging aspects of gaining momentum for Black Boardroom Initiative.
Thank you, Stewart. I'd like to begin by thanking the Seattle Rotary for inviting us to discuss the Black Boardroom Initiative today. We appreciate this opportunity to provide an update on our program that really launched earlier this year. Regarding your question, Stewart, I would say that there were 3 challenging aspects of getting momentum. 1, recognition that the program was needed. 2, getting financial support. And 3, developing a high caliber program. I'll discuss each one. Recognition that the program was needed. As with all things brand new, the biggest challenge is getting liftoff. recognition and confirmation that the program is needed. We had the advantage, as is mentioned, of following the model of the phenomenally successful onboarding women program developed by Stewart and Perkins, Coie, Deloitte, Madrona, Cascadia Capital, and Spencer Stewart in an effort to increase the number of women serving on private and public company boards here in Washington State. Several years ago, Keith Matthews, the general counsel of the Gates Foundation, and I met with Stewart to explore the creation of a similar program to increase the number of African Americans serving on corporate boards here in Washington. We reconvened, as Trey mentioned, in the summer of 2020 as corporations were trying to determine the critical role they could play in addressing the racial and social justice challenges in our country following the death of George Floyd. Stewart invited Deloitte to join in the planning, and we agreed, quite frankly, the time was right to launch the Black Boardroom Initiative. You know, it was critical for us to get broad support, including financial support from the corporate community for this Black Boardroom Initiative. We desired to create a program that would allow Black business leaders to participate at no cost. While we received strong monetary support from sponsors, it was equally important that they provide their stamp of approval of this proof of concept. We were thrilled to get support, as Stewart mentioned, from Microsoft, Amazon, Zillow, F5, Starbucks, Brent Haven, and RealNetworks, in addition to the leadership of Perkins, Coie, and Deloitte. The third challenge that we faced was developing a high caliber program. But as I mentioned, we had the advantage of following the Onboarding Women program. We were able to utilize some of the materials and the general program design established by Onboarding Women. This allowed us to focus our efforts on recruiting experienced and board savvy mentors, high caliber presenters with subject matter expertise, and a class of rock solid and board ready senior business leaders to participate in the initial class. All in all, we were able to surmount the initial challenges and get out of the gate with a strong start. We're already seeing early returns, and we expect that to extend over time. Thank you.
Stewart, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, it was not unmuting. I'm sorry. So Michael, thank you so much. And now let me turn to Pat Ogawa and say, Pat, you're a partner at Deloitte. You're a consulting partner working with some of the world's most successful corporations, many of them based here in the greater Seattle area. You are the Seattle office managing partner at Deloitte, and you have a nationwide perspective on diversity and inclusion for Deloitte. Can you help us think through a little bit of how it was that Deloitte came to decide to become involved institutionally as a sponsor?
Thanks, Stewart. Then I'll have to share my thanks with Rotary as well. You've been doing this obviously a lot longer than us, since 1905, I believe. And I did live in Evanston once in my past, where the office was, and you've always, focused on social justice and purpose for all. So thanks for all you do. In terms of our involvement, Stewart, it was pretty easy, obviously, after the success of onboarding women. And I'll go back to maybe what we discussed earlier when we were putting together thoughts for the Black Boardroom Initiative, right? I mean, the quote that strikes me, from MLK, it's always the right time to do the right thing, right? And I think for all of us, we truly believe this was the right time to make something happen with the Black Boardroom Initiative. So it was an easy decision for us. And I'm trying to remember, trying to get senior leaders in our firm to get on board with sponsoring this. And it literally took, I think I drafted, a short paragraph, literally 2 sentences to our chief purpose officer and chief diversity officer. And, he responded within 5 minutes, supporting this both from a financial standpoint and a talent standpoint. So I'll start with that thought, Stewart. And then I think the second thing is, when we put this together, we thought that potentially there would be a pipeline issue in this region. And what we found out, obviously, as we went through the recruitment for the first cohort, there was so much talent in this area that we had an oversubscribed list of Black executives that were more than ready to serve on boards. So I think we'll see continued momentum, with this. And I think we'll see continued momentum nationwide, right? As other cities, follow our lead. And I think it's, pretty cool that, a small little group in Seattle may have started something small, but I think it may make a difference, nationwide.
Thank you, Pat. And the enthusiasm with which Pat and Deloitte have jumped in, the enthusiasm that Michael and colleagues at Real have brought, that the Keith and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation colleagues bring, that colleagues that every one of our sponsors bring, has been just inspirational, and it's been really quite quick. And I'll just mention one theme that Pat mentions is this question of people wondering, well, is there a pipeline? We heard that question early in the years of onboarding women, and the answer is, well, no, there are plenty of great directors who are women, and there are plenty of great directors who are Black. It just is that people, for whatever reason, some complex combination of reasons, the funnel is not opening for corporate boards, and these initiatives are simply, among other things, ways of simply proving out that thesis that there are spectacular candidates, and we've seen it in onboarding women, and we're going to see it in Black Boardroom Initiative. Trey, let me turn back to you for another question, which are what are the roles that these different players in the Black Boardroom Initiative play, and how have they contributed? Trey may need to be unmuted here.
Thanks, my mute button was stuck. Thanks, Stewart. There are four main, I'll call them groups, involved with the Black Boardroom Initiative, and I'll talk about sort of each bucket. The first is our cohort, which we're all very excited about this year. It consists of 23 Black executives, most of them either in the C-suite or direct reports to their C-suite. They represent a wide industry and different roles in that industry. We try to make the cohort reflect what an actual board may look like. So for instance, despite the number of lawyers on this panel, we know that a board probably doesn't need 75% lawyers. And so there's only a couple of seats in the cohort for lawyers, and people of all various roles at a company are in the cohort. The second group is our mentors, which Stewart said we're always looking for. And we've been very fortunate to have a great set of mentors who have lent their time to this program and given our cohort their guidance. They are all current public company directors, and so they can draw from their vast experience to help guide our cohort toward their ultimate goal of getting placed on a board. The third group, which has gotten a little bit of attention already, is what I'll call our core founders and group of advisors. And so in addition to the folks on this call and those that have been mentioned, we've also received insights and inputs from a number of prominent community stakeholders, so that we're ensuring our program, has the scope and input from a wide base of people. And so that's just been a really great lift, giving this program energy. Last but not least, Stewart, we of course can't forget about our sponsors who you've mentioned. And so thrilled this year to have what's come to be a really excellent who's who group of sponsors in this region. And they've just provided so much of a platform for us.
Well, Trey, thank you so much for that and for everything that you are doing. And let me turn back to Michael Parham and ask Michael, we've talked a little bit about the educational aspects and a little bit about the training with our great panel members and mentors in the program, but what are the important aspects of the program beyond those two aspects, beyond the education and training in your mind?
Thanks, Stewart. As we discussed, and as you just mentioned, it was mission critical for us to establish curriculum and training that was world-class, largely through local and national networks of Perkins, Coie, and Deloitte. We've been able to recruit subject matter experts with national reputations. These experts have led each BBI session, providing a high level of learning and engagement for our participants. But in addition to those sessions, each participant, as we've discussed, has an experienced mentor who can provide personal advice, counsel, and engagement. We all know, and I'm sure that members of the Rotary know as a core principle, we all benefit by expanding our networks, and the participants in the program through their mentors, sponsors, and others, we all have benefited from expanding our respective networks. Several years ago, I attended a meeting of the National Association of Corporate Directors in DC. I wanted to attend a panel on diversifying corporate boards. The key takeaway for me was that new corporate directors are generally recruited from the networks of existing corporate directors led by CEO and nominations and governance chairs. This is a pipeline issue that has been discussed and will continue to be discussed in this session. And our program is intended to enhance the pipeline, to increase the pool of candidates for consideration as board openings arise. But generally speaking, we have, I think, just as a kind of natural consequence of a program of our type, despite being virtual in this first year, we've expanded our respective networks. As Trey mentioned, we have executives with a wide range of backgrounds, a couple of lawyers, but generally speaking, we have a lot of operational execs. We have some CEOs, we have presidents, we have operational persons that run operations at respective companies. And I think that collective interaction of networking will, inure to the benefit of everyone involved in a wide variety of ways down the road. So,
Michael, thank you so much. And the hourglass of time is running out for us. I think we have one more minute for our panel questions. I'm going to ask Pat Ogawa and then turn to the audience. Pat, with your experience founding and then working on Black Boardroom Initiative, can you comment on this issue of the pipeline?
Thanks, Stewart. And then I saw the other question come up. I'll try to maybe address both, given the
Great.
So let me take them in reverse because I love the question. So there's a question in the chat about the Black Boardroom Initiative and this initiative in general being good for business. In the conversations we've had with current Black Boardroom execs, two things popped up, right? The impact that people and firms make in their community tend to be exponentially stronger when there's a diverse perspective. And so, take for example, there's a couple real live, projects that I'm working on with clients where, the growth is really going to come from underserved markets, underserved demographics, right? And if you can't recruit, leadership at the C-suite and in the board level, it's very difficult to understand the specific needs and experiences for that community. And that's sort of a simple one in terms of why it's good for business. The second point I'll make is that we try to do this specifically when a client asks us to solve a particular problem. We try to bring the most diverse perspective into that room. Black, white, male, female, linear, non-linear, because the best thinking comes typically from us from the edges. So hopefully that answers the question in terms of why it's good for business. On the pipeline issue, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Like we said, there's no talent pipeline shortage in the Northwest, and I'm assuming that's the case nationwide as we're starting to see. What's been interesting though in the conversations with some of the directors now that are serving as mentors is how do you have this flywheel effect of the network, right? And an interesting insight, and I posted the Wall Street Journal article in the chat if you have a chance to take a look at it. It came out yesterday. And Ken Denman, who's a mentor for this program and a pretty good friend of the program in general, actually a great supporter. His interesting perspective is, and he gets lots of calls to serve on boards. He does not turn down any one of them. And a lot of the calls typically are not the right fit for him, but he takes the calls from recruiters and execs because he wants to pass those opportunities on to other folks that he thinks are qualified, right? So what we're starting to see is this network effect within Black leaders, the cohort that's starting to spin, which I think is going to give us a lot of momentum in the future. And Stewart, if I play this forward, 5 years from now or 6 years from now in terms of where the Black Boardroom Initiative would be compared to onboarding women. I bet we'll have, that same success factor in terms of the number of placements across the board in this region.
Pat, thank you so very much. Let me, I had one question from the audience that came direct, a very good question, which is, are there industry sectors that tend to be ahead on diverse boards and industry sectors that tend to be behind? I'd love a thought from any one of our any one of our members, and then I'm getting a sands of time message saying that this may be our last question.
Yeah. I can answer it quickly, Stewart, if
Great.
that's the case. So, talking to Goldman Sachs and their recruiting team for any companies that are being floated public in a public transaction, they're requiring minority participation in the board. So, at least what I'm seeing, Stewart, anything that is tech, anything that is hot in terms of going to market, that's probably where you're seeing the spike. And I think the second place I think we'll start to see is the state of California, right? Given the requirement of, one minority board member this winter, and then 2 in 22 and 3 in 23.
Well, thank you. And as Rotary sees, with Pat Ogawa and Michael Parham and Trey Chenier running this show, it's going to be a success. So thanks for giving us this time today.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Stewart, your timing is impeccable. You should take my job next time. Thank you to everybody's conversation. Very good. I did have one quick question, but I will ping you guys and ask later on. Carl, thank you for bringing this forward too. I really appreciate it. So thank you to all of you very, very much. It's a good conversation. It's an important conversation, and it's one that I'm glad to see you guys are chipping away at. So good luck. All right, quick shout out to our big major league sponsors, Liz Powell with Remax on Market, and Bob Alexander, always two superstars within our group,